There is a moment that happens again and again, usually before anything is said. An invitation arrives, a reminder, a date circled on someone else's calendar, a message that assumes enthusiasm. You read it, and nothing rises up inside you. No excitement, no anticipation, not even resistance. Just a flat, quiet awareness that you won't be celebrating. You don't make a point of it. You don't announce that you don't celebrate. You don't argue with the occasion. You simply don't step into it. You let the day pass like any other day. You eat, you work, you rest. The world moves on. From the outside, this can look cold or sad or strangely distant. But from the inside, it often feels neutral, calm even. There's no sense of loss, just an absence of impulse. Celebrations tend to come with a script. You're supposed to feel something. You're supposed to mark the moment. Birthdays, holidays, milestones, each one arrives with an expectation already attached. Joy is assumed, participation is implied. And when that feeling doesn't show up, it can feel awkward to explain. So you usually don't. You might attend briefly and leave early, or not attend at all. You might send a polite message, or nothing. You might be present physically, but not emotionally engaged. Not because you're unhappy, but because the ritual doesn't connect. There's often a quiet pressure around this, a sense that celebration is a sign of gratitude, health, or love. That not celebrating must mean something is missing. That refusing the ritual is the same as refusing the people. But that isn't how it feels from the inside. From the inside, it feels like stepping aside while others step forward, like watching a shared movement without needing to join it. The noise, the timing, the emphasis, it all feels slightly out of sync with your inner rhythm. Sometimes you notice how loud celebration can be, how quickly it fills space, how it demands reaction. You might feel more yourself before and after it when the atmosphere settles back down. This doesn't come from bitterness or trauma or a desire to stand out. Most of the time, it's simply how things land. The occasion arrives and it doesn't take hold, so you don't celebrate. You let the moment pass without marking it, without turning it into meaning, without performing joy or gratitude or belonging. And in doing so, you quietly step outside a ritual that everyone else seems to move through automatically, not to reject it, but because it doesn't feel like yours. From a Jungian perspective, not celebrating isn't first about rejecting joy. It's about how the inner world responds to collective emotion when it arrives on schedule. Celebrations come preloaded. They carry a shared mood, a tempo, an emotional demand. You're expected to feel something specific at a specific time. And when that feeling doesn't appear, the psyche notices the mismatch. Not as rebellion, but as dissonance. Inside, there is often a quiet withdrawal, not dramatic, not defensive, more like stepping back half a pace. The inner world doesn't refuse the moment, it simply doesn't open to it. The excitement doesn't land, the meaning doesn't attach. What's happening outside doesn't mirror what's happening inside. Jung would say this is often about inner timing. The psyche moves at its own rhythm. It integrates experiences slowly, privately. Rituals, especially public ones, compress feeling into a moment that must be marked now. For some people, that compression feels intrusive. It asks the inner life to surface before it's ready, or in a form that doesn't feel true. There can also be a strong protective element. Celebration exposes emotion outwardly. It asks for visible reaction, happiness, gratitude, enthusiasm. When someone doesn't celebrate, they may be preserving something fragile or unfinished inside. Not hiding it, just not offering it up for display. This doesn't mean there is no joy. Often, joy exists quietly, without punctuation. It appears at unexpected times. It doesn't gather into peaks. It doesn't ask to be witnessed. Jung would recognize this as a different relationship to feeling, not an absence of it. There can also be relief in not celebrating, relief from performance, relief from expectation. relief from having to align inner experience with outer demand. In that space, the person may feel more coherent, more intact. At the same time, Jung wouldn't idealize this. Avoidance can sit next to authenticity. Sometimes not celebrating protects depth. Sometimes it protects distance. Sometimes it simply maintains equilibrium. The psyche does what it needs to do to remain whole. What matters is not whether celebration is embraced or refused, but whether the inner life is being respected. From this lens, not celebrating isn't a statement about the event, the people, or the value of joy itself. It's an inward adjustment, a way of staying aligned when the outer world moves too loudly or too quickly. Jung would leave the moment open. He wouldn't ask why the ritual was declined. He would ask whether the inner world felt safer, steadier, and more honest by not stepping into it. When someone doesn't celebrate, the meaning is rarely left open. Almost immediately, a story forms around the refusal. Nietzsche would pay close attention to that story, not to correct it, but to understand why it appears so quickly and with such confidence. Celebration has become a moral signal. It's not just about marking time or sharing joy, it's about proving alignment. You celebrate to show gratitude. You celebrate to show health. You celebrate to show that you are properly engaged with life as it is supposed to be lived. In this framework, enthusiasm is not optional, it is expected. Nietzsche would notice how quietly this expectation operates. No one needs to say, "You must celebrate." The demand is already built into the atmosphere. Birthdays, holidays, achievements, each one arrives with an emotional script attached. To follow the script is invisible. To step outside it is immediately visible. When someone doesn't celebrate, their silence doesn't stay neutral for long. It is interpreted. It becomes sadness, bitterness, ingratitude, or emotional distance. Sometimes it's softened into, "They're just not like that." But even that creates a category, a deviation from the norm that needs to be named. Nietzsche would argue that this reaction protects a deeper belief that life must be affirmed loudly, that meaning must be expressed publicly, that joy, if it is real, will announce itself. Anyone who doesn't perform, that affirmation threatens the belief itself. Their quiet suggests that meaning might exist without display, and that is unsettling. You would also notice how celebration creates hierarchy. Some moments are deemed worthy of attention, some emotions are rewarded, others are ignored. To refuse celebration is to refuse participation in that ranking system. It is not rebellion, but it is non-compliance. Importantly, Nietzsche would resist turning this refusal into virtue. He would not praise the person who doesn't celebrate as deeper, truer, or more authentic. That would simply replace one moral story with another. Instead, he would question why celebration has been given so much authority in the first place. Why must joy be visible to count? Why must gratitude be expressed on schedule? Why does silence make people uncomfortable? From this lens, not celebrating isn't a rejection of life, it's a refusal to translate life into performance. It challenges the idea that meaning needs witnesses, that emotion needs ceremony, that participation is the same as belonging. Nietzsche would leave the discomfort unresolved. He wouldn't ask the person to explain themselves. He would ask the culture why it needs explanation at all. When someone doesn't celebrate, the reaction around them often isn't open conflict, it's adjustment. Arendt would notice this first, the way shared rituals organize social life without ever announcing themselves as rules. Celebrations function as quiet agreements. They reassure the group that bonds are intact, that values are shared, that everyone is moving in the same emotional direction at the same time. Participation doesn't need to be enforced because it's assumed. Most people step into the ritual without thinking about it. When someone doesn't, the disruption is subtle but real. Arendt would point out that rituals don't rely on belief, they rely on repetition. The power of celebration comes from everyone doing it together, over and over, until it feels natural. Opting out interrupts that rhythm. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to be noticed. The response is rarely accusation, it's more often confusion. Invitations become more careful, explanations are quietly expected. The absence of celebration starts to feel like a statement, even when none was intended. Fromm would look at what this does emotionally. Celebration isn't only about marking time, it's about reassurance. It confirms belonging. It says, "You're still with us." When someone doesn't participate, others can feel unsettled, as if a thread has loosened. This is where pressure appears. Friends may worry, family may insist. The group doesn't say, "You must celebrate," but it asks questions that carry the same weight. Are you okay? Did something happen? Why don't you want to join? The refusal is treated as a symptom rather than a preference. Fromm would note that this pressure often comes from care, not control. But care can still be constraining. The need for shared joy becomes a demand for alignment. Emotional freedom narrows. Over time, the person who doesn't celebrate may feel themselves shifting position. They aren't excluded outright, but they're slightly out of step. The group adjusts around them, expectations change, the ritual continues just without them. This is the quiet consequence of stepping outside. Arendt and Fromm wouldn't judge this. They would simply observe how systems protect themselves. When rituals define belonging, non-participation doesn't stay private for long. It reshapes relationships, not through punishment, but through subtle reorganization. What looks like a small personal choice reveals something larger, how much social life depends on shared performance, and how uncomfortable it becomes when someone declines to play their part, not in protest, but in silence. Not celebrating doesn't arrive with a final explanation. There is no moment where the choice feels complete, justified, or settled once and for all. It simply becomes part of how life is lived, gradually losing its sharp edges and turning into something ordinary. Dates still come, birthdays still exist, holidays still pass. Milestones still happen in the lives of others, but they move through your days without asking to be marked. Time keeps going evenly, without peaks that demand attention. One day doesn't need to stand apart from another to feel real. At first, this can feel strange. There's a sense that something should be happening, some emotional response that hasn't arrived. But over time, that expectation fades. The calendar loosens its grip. Days become quieter, less loaded. Time flattens out in a way that feels steady rather than empty. Without celebration, meaning changes shape. Moments aren't elevated by ceremony. Joy doesn't need permission or witnesses. Sadness doesn't need framing. Experiences come and go without being declared important in advance. Life feels less segmented, less managed, less arranged around shared signals of significance. There is also a subtle freedom here. Without ritual, there is less pressure to feel the right thing at the right time. Emotion can arrive late or not at all. Gratitude doesn't have to be expressed publicly to be felt. Connection doesn't need an occasion to exist. Over time, the reactions of others soften. The concern fades, the insistence quiets. People adjust the way they always do. Your absence from celebration becomes familiar rather than confusing. The world reorganizes itself around the fact that you move differently through time. Nothing needs to be defended. Not celebrating doesn't mean rejecting people, joy, or life itself. It means declining the structure that tells you when feeling should happen and how it should look. It's a refusal to translate experience into ritual just to make it legible to others. There is no promise here that this way of living is deeper or more authentic. It isn't offered as an alternative model. It's simply a description of how some people stay aligned with themselves. Some people need ceremony to feel grounded. Others feel most grounded when nothing is being marked. Stepping outside the ritual doesn't make life smaller, it makes it quieter. And in that quiet, life continues, unannounced, uncelebrated, and fully present in its own time.